And now that brings us to Edit System, where we can see all of the various pages here in the system. It's really just the modules, okay, for the devices. And keep in mind, not everything's actually going to be in our system unless we brought it in as a single device, or as a content, I should say. But all of the behind the scenes things are down here in the second window of Edit System. We have the Variables tab, and we call this Scenarios Macros. So any events, actions that occur as a means of pressing a button. For example, I pressed Presentation, and I said we're going to create by name a macro, right? So here it is. It's there. I press the button, and in the bottom center we have our events and actions. I could move my workspace around, and I could say all of my events and actions I want to occur. So we call this ad lib programming. We have IR, RS-232, TCP/IP, and more. So we just chose RS-232. What device do I want to control? Now we're on to our amplifier we're controlling. Output 1. Here's all the commands for the device. Here's volume XX. And what is XX value? Well, you really have to know the device you're controlling and what volume level you need. So we're just going to set it nice and comfortable there to 15%. We're going to control our switcher. Output 1. Select input 3, which is the the Podium laptop. So whatever's the default source for the presentation. It's really up to you, the programmer, and to collect the information from your user on how they want to control, or how they need the room to configure. So we have the projector. I'm going to copy all those things, because I'm also going to add one more thing here before I go pasting this elsewhere, and that is how to use the trigger. You just choose the master controller, so that's the RL icon there for relay, and we chose the trigger port, and we got the options there, on, off, toggle, that sort of thing you could see. So now I'm going to take those 3 strings that I had in the presentation, and I'm going to go to video conference, and we want to do pretty much exactly the same thing, right? Except for we're not going to default to a laptop, we're going to default to the video conference codec, which is input 2 of our presentation switcher. Conference call, we don't need the projector. But I need to set the volume nice and conservatively, but also I need to switch my amplifier to select the second input. Remember, the AM220 has two inputs there, and we don't need to switch our 4x1 switch, but since I'm controlling the same device 2 commands in a row, I'm going to put a little delay in there using that pause icon and defining it as 0.2 seconds in the properties on the right there. Save early, save often. What other macros do we have here? We've built the presentation. Here's our AV endpoint. When I press that AV endpoint, remember the power on. So just pressing that very button there and having the selected option of power on. How about presentation switch? So I'm in the presentation and I have my AV endpoint. You see there, SM_AV endpoint. Source 1, 2, 3, 4. That's where all of that lives. These source names and source numbers and all that, these are variables that the system references, but not really something you need to edit. Here's when I press Apple TV and we created a macro. Here's what all happens. Powers on the projector, switches the switcher, and switches to the correct input on the projector. So this was all automatic there. Conference call selects, the one we just built. Video conference select, everything that happens here. Power on the projector, switch the switch, and switch the projector. Video conference select, so just pressing that video conference there is turning on the projector. So since it was the AV endpoint, just making sure that projector's on. No harm in getting a head start there. How about though if I want to, in the video conference, when I select anything in the AV endpoint for video conference, we need to make sure the amplifier is on the proper input, right? So I could edit these default commands here, our default macros. Keep in mind though, if you do recompile, you'll lose the events that came in on these auto-built macros, okay? So you'll want to kind of experiment with that on your own a little bit, what you lose, what you don't. And there are kind of storage places you could put those things if need be. So remember, any of these times we're switching between presentation or audio conference, video conference, there's going to be different inputs on the AMP220 that we had to make sure about in our system design. Emulator is not really good for on the PC software because the compiled project is not really, it's designed to work on the iPad.